Thanks for everybody for being a little bit patient at the beginning. I hope you had time to answer our Slido poll. I'm going to kick off right now because I want to make sure that we have as much time as possible for the Q&A on this session. So we're absolutely delighted to welcome Marius Vašcega, who is the head of cabinet for Commissioner Sinkevicius for Environmental Affairs today, to tell us a little bit more about the second circular economy package. Just to give you a little bit of a sense on how we're going to run the webinar today, I'll start with just a very brief housekeeping rules. Then we'll hand over to Marius, who will tell us a little bit about the perspective from the Commission. I'll give you a few details on the basis of what the work AmCham has been doing, and with that, we're hoping to keep half the webinar just for an open Q&A and to have this be as interactive as possible. If I may, I would strongly recommend that we take advantage of the fact that Marius is actually an insider of all EU political institutions, that he's been through the Parliament, the Perm Rep, and the Commission. So his insight will most absolutely invaluable to us going forward. With that, and just to make sure that all of us are ready, first, housekeeping rules. Please, everybody, go on unless you're speaking. During the Q&A, we're going to manage, the communication very openly. If you have any questions throughout the event, please put them in the chat so that we can keep track of who wants to speak when and manage that as effectively as possible during the Q&A. During the Q&A, please go on video. If not, please do not, so that we do not overload the bandwidth on this webinar. So second piece of housekeeping that I need to start with, otherwise, I would not be doing my hosting duties properly. For those of you who are less familiar with AmCham, I would like to tell you a little bit about the organization. AmCham EU is a trade association representing 155 companies who are committed to the European project. So even though we are headquartered in the US, some of us have been in the European region for 100 years. And one of the things that really makes us stand out is that we are very much committed to the single market, and in a way, sometimes more than European companies who are less present in all markets of the single market as we can be as American companies. We're committed to Europe. We're also obviously committed to a strong and effective transatlantic relationship. And we see this relationship as a driver of growth and prosperity on either side of the Atlantic. According to our latest statistics, the transatlantic relationship is $3 trillion and around 4.8 million jobs that are supported by this, very important partnership going forward. And this partnership is valid in the space of environment as well, which is what we're hoping to investigate a little bit today. And with that, I think I will just hand over to our guest immediately. Marius, the floor is yours. I don't know if you have any slides or anything that you would like to share, but please, make the best use of your time. And we're going to be thinking about questions for you in the meantime while you speak. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Very good, and thank you for invitation. Good afternoon to all who are tuned in and who are listening. I hope you hear me well, Leah. If all goes well technically, one always has to check with these things. A circular economy action plan, indeed, a very good topic, and I'm really glad that you have chosen this topic to speak and that you have invited me to share my views on that. A circular economy action plan was adopted. The second circular economy action plan was adopted in the European Commission on 11th of March, right before the height of the COVID crisis started in Europe. Today actually is another big deliverable which we, as the Commission and as Commissioner Sinkevicius also managed to deliver, is the biodiversity strategy. So this is also something which I want to advertise to an extent, because this is a topic which often not seen, so it's not very much in the mainstream. But I think circular economy, if we come back to the 2016, when the first circular economy action plan was made public, at that time was also not very much in the mainstream, and now we are speaking about it, so much with the industries. Everyone is seeing opportunities in it. So biodiversity, I hope, is the next topic, you know, to look at and to really find opportunities also there. But coming back to the circular economy, of course, you know, since the adoption of the circular economy action plan, many things have happened. It's only what, 9-10 weeks, but it's really the world has been changing in a ways which we were never imagining it can change, actually. And of course, during that time, you know, our biggest attention was to managing the health crisis and to developing strategies to exit from this health crisis, and you know, also helping the economies spur economic activity so that it would rejump. But while doing that, we were always thinking that it can and it should rejump better, in a way more sustainable, so that it would not be a rejump back, but how can we use it as our leap forward? And frankly, I think that circular economy is really a very good tool for that. Circular economy, you know, even before the confinement, before COVID, everybody was realizing its potential. Everybody was thinking that it's good, that it's sustainable, that it's a tool to achieve a more sustainability in resources, and so on and so forth. But now I think there is another angle from which we can look at it, and that another angle is resilience. Is resilience of our economies. You know, I think what COVID has clearly shown that we would benefit from more resilience in the economies. Everyone is looking what are also in the businesses, what are the most resilient parts of their businesses, you know, and how to improve that resilience. We are also doing that for the economy, and circular economy promises. Why does it promise? It's because, and especially looking from the European perspective, Europe is not very rich in some of the resources. In some it is rich, but in some which are, you know, rare earths and various other things, it is not very rich in those resources. So it really makes sense to in fact keep those resources as long as possible in the economy, to use the products which are produced longer, to, you know, not to look at things which we are used to think as waste, not to look at it as waste, but to think that these are also the resources and how can we use them. And this can certainly increase our resilience. And this is how we are looking at circular economy now, you know, while we are looking at the post-COVID world. There is also another angle to this. You know, the European Green Deal, which has been adopted in December, not that long ago, it will clearly stay. It's not something that now we would like to put aside. It is clearly a route together with the digital transformation. It is clearly a route to our recovery, and these are taken as the two most important points for. Or most important compasses, you know, for our recovery. And if we look at the European Green Deal, to me, it's clear that the circular economy is actually the economic heart of the Green Deal. And you know, it's the circular economy which has a huge potential of creating jobs, which has a huge potential, you know, for first move advantage, for new markets, for drive for innovation. So it's a really, it is, and it should be, you know, at the heart of our recovery, which is the next Commission's deliverable to come in a week or two or pretty soon. So that's a bit in terms of introduction of how we see circular economy in the current world, you know, not on 11th of March, but on 20th of May. And then now maybe a few remarks on what's in this circular economy action plan. And then, of course, I'm ready to take answers, as many as I can take them, you know, and as many as I will be able to answer them. So the new circular economy action plan announces initiatives for the entire life cycle of products, from design and manufacturing to consumption, to repair, to reuse, to recycling, and bringing resources back into economy. And the idea is, of course, is to reduce the consumption footprint and to double the circular material use rate in the coming decade. This is, an ambition which we have in mind when we were coming up with the Circular Economy Action Plan. Now, at the heart of the new Circular Economy Action Plan, there is a sustainable product policy legislative initiatives. And the core of this initiative is to widen the eco-design directive beyond just energy-related products and to make the eco-design framework applicable to the broadest possible range of products and make it deliver on circularity, in fact. Another thing which we are looking with the Circular Economy Action Plan is to continue empowering consumers so that they could be also contributing to circular economy. First of all, it's an initiative to tackle misleading green claims and to provide consumers with information on the repairability, durability of products. We also want the consumers to start benefiting from a true right to repair. The programmed obsolescence should be a thing of the past if we really want to achieve circularity in our economies. The Commission will also propose minimum mandatory green public procurement criteria and certain targets in sectoral legislation, and then also phase in compulsory reporting to monitor their uptake. So, there are plenty of actions. If you look at the annex, it's really full of details. And I know that AmCham has been looking at it because we have received your contribution also on circular economy, and that is of course very beneficial for us to see also how industry sees it, and it's encouraging. It's also it also stimulates our thinking, and absolutely we are in constant contact with the industry. But perhaps maybe a few sectors where we see that circularity has the biggest potential. On one hand is the biggest potential. On the other hand, maybe it's close to being ripe to deliver there, and so on. So we think that electronics and ICT is one of those sectors, and circular electronics initiatives allows us to have longer product lifetimes, improve the collection and treatment of waste, and so on. It's also batteries and vehicles, so that we would have a new regulatory framework for enhancing their sustainability and boosting their circular potential. It's also about packaging and having certain mandatory requirements on what is allowed on the EU market, including the reduction of over-packaging. This does not mean, that now somebody would like to really regulate the packaging, but I think the idea is to look to have a more sustainable look at it, how we can make it more sustainable. It's also plastics, but here on plastics, of course, there were actions which have been taken in the past. So, but now we want to also look at the microplastics as well as bio-based, biodegradable plastics and things like that. Is the textiles, which by the way, it's quite a pressure category, on water resources, on other resources, and so on. And this is where indeed very little recycling is currently taking place. But it's also construction and buildings. That is, I think, where we can have a very promising future. It's also food, but food is perhaps a bit apart. It's more a special thing. You have to connect it to the common agricultural policy and various other things. But still, it is a very important thing, and especially if we are looking, and we are thinking on how to really ensure food safety. And that is becoming a question here. I think circularity and avoiding as much as possible the food waste. This is one of the very promising avenues. So I think I gave you an outline of those many actions which I included there in the Circular Economy Action Plan. but I think what is important and why I'm so glad to be here on this call, on this WebEx seminar, is that we indeed need business community. We need to we would like that business community feels part of the transformation. We want to know, that we are working into the same direction. We want to know that that business community sees opportunities in that. And of course, this also includes American companies operating in Europe, absolutely. That's why I'm happy to be here, and I will stop at this point and will be glad to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe before we completely open to the Q&A, I just wanted to give you a few of the lessons learned from the brochure we compiled around the circular economy. And we've kind of followed the Commission on this one. We had a 2015 brochure, and now we have a 2020 brochure. So this is wave 2 as well. But just to give you a little bit of a sense of what it is that we are soft launching in a virtual manner, even though because it's not possible to have physical events at the moment. But what we see as really the beginning of a conversation that we hope to take things forward in the months to come as we continue working on this agenda and obviously in the legislation that's coming in. Maybe just to give a sense before we go into the details, and bear with me because I want to do justice to the 15 very good examples that are in that brochure, but only have 10 minutes. So I'm hoping that some of the representatives from the sectors and the companies will speak up during Q&A to go into further details. But I wanted to react to some of the things you were saying. Whereas we completely see the difference between Circular Economy 1 and Circular Economy 2. The way we saw Circular Economy 1 in our internal discussions as AmCham was, in a way, it helped give us some of the critical concepts that were needed to frame the agenda and get a sense of it. What we're hoping now for Circular Economy 2 is to work in discussion around the circular economy and to have something that is much more turned towards delivery and scaling up efforts rather than something that is, a discussion where we need to refine definitions or we need to refine laws like this, the Waste Framework Directive. And that was, in a way, the main driver for us compiling this second version of the brochure. Our examples have gotten more concrete, more pragmatic, more close to ground than in the first edition as well, which I think, really shows the difference in the maturity of the private sector on this subject, and also some of the avenues that we're starting to work on, where we see opportunities, where we would like to help tackling certain obstacles. And I think, one of the key things before we go really into the actual examples, and I'll be very short here, and to qualify a little bit what I mean by the economics of the circular economy. The way corporations come to the circular economy discussion is one around resource saving and cost efficiencies that are there. And the second one is about anticipating our customers' needs, seeing what is the moving space of what our customers, whether it's in the business-to-business world, or the industrial space, or in the business-to-consumer world, want from our products and our services, and make sure that we're meeting those needs in the best way possible. And I'd say these are some of the two main drivers. So meeting up to the society's challenge, and particularly society here, our main stakeholder is our customers. So what that means in terms of the future of our operations to make sure that we continue to be economically viable, because if we produce something that our customers don't want or doesn't meet their needs, we're not doing our job properly. But also really getting a sense of, in the efficiencies and the greater pressure, around lean manufacturing, around reducing costs, how circular economy is an opportunity to do so rather than an obstacle. Maybe we can just move on to the first slide where we talk about some of these lessons. So bear with me, this is my summarizing and trying to bring together clusters of some of the examples we have in our brochure. But I thought the first one to really remind, and this is something we've encountered in our discussions with lawmakers and regulators at EU and national level when we talk about circular economy. Sometimes people think of it as only a business to consumer space. You know, it's the end consumer, it's the municipal waste discussion. Whereas the way private sector looks at circular economy is much more varied and, you know, goes from the industrial space and how to make sure that something like, you know, waste heat can actually be turned to make steam and have a very efficient manufacturing plant, and that's the example we have from LyondellBasell, to really effective collaboration, you know, between a big manufacturer like Boeing and his supplier to be able to get carbon fiber out of the manufacturing process, or, you know, your very obvious business to consumer space, which is that of toys and what can be done to meet customer needs and in terms of recycling. And obviously, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which deals more with the servers, gives you the business-to-business version of the business-to-consumer. Your customers have needs, you provide them an end-of-life service. What does that look like? And I think there's a need. May I ask whoever just joined to go on mute? Thank you. There will be a chance for Q&A in a few minutes. So what we wanted to do with this slide is really give a sense of just how varied the worlds of the circular economy are and how it impacts the way we do business, whether our end customer is a family, another company, or whether our end customer in a way is our shareholders, and making sure that we're making, you know, the best use of energy and natural resources possible. Could we maybe move on to the next slide? The second lesson we have come to, and these are very, you know, business to consumer examples, is really that actually partnerships and ecosystems are essential to finding the solutions when it comes to the circular economy. Increasingly, we need to partner with local governments, we need to partner with our suppliers, we need to partner with IT providers to be able to manage, you know, the costs associated with some of these progress and, you know, really anticipate what the next wave of our citizens' needs and desires will be to make sure that, you know, we're on the right trajectory and we're doing so in the most cost-effective way possible. And so you have examples that go to the Coca-Cola bottle and cans, to partnerships that McDonald's and Starbucks are having to try and have more recyclable to-go cups, to, you know, the packaging of pet food. I mean, the circular economy can really be found everywhere. Maybe next slide. One of the biggest obstacles we see, and again, you know, going back to the notion of economics we were trying to stress earlier on in the discussion, for the circular economy to really be the strength that it can be and really be the revolution of the economic system it should be, we need to find ways to get to the point where your recycled product, even though it must be treated first and most expensively of all, collected and brought back, we need to make sure that even with those extra costs and reverse logistics, it is as cost competitive with virgin material as possible. And here we have three very creative ideas on how to go about managing the logistical side of the circular economy. It goes from HP's example, which is of, in a way, selling printing services rather than just printer cartridges, to Johnson & Johnson's mobile recycling for some of their operations to make sure that, you know, you don't have to build very capital intensive manufacturing sites everywhere, and be able to kind of think outside the box around what are the resources that are needed to be able to recuperate certain secondary net material. To obviously the loop example that you have with UPS, Coca-Cola, and Mars, where you basically use reusable containers when it comes to shipping, and develop new business models and realities in that sense. Just a couple more slides and then we can go to the Q&A. I think one of the very other important lessons we're seeing, and this is something that's maybe sometimes difficult in the context of the regulatory discussions, this is a very creative space where we bring in a lot of partnerships, where we're trying to really think outside the box. And in a way, being too prescriptive around what is good recycling and what is not, what is downcycling and therefore, you know, a little bit snuffed at, as opposed to closed loop. In a way, even though these are useful concepts, again, that we've inherited from the first circular economy discussion, the truth is they can be a little bit limiting in the very creative space we're dealing with the circular economy. And here you have examples where Dow offers services to really rethink packaging with a number of industry actors. Michelin is rethinking the tire, and 3M uses recycled bottles and plastics to make, you know, insulation material that, in a way, is going into more sophisticated products than the products they came from, and create value. And somehow this hierarchy that you absolutely must close the loop is a little bit limiting instead of being a creative asset. Just one more slide, and then we'll open up to the Q&A, and I'm very excited to see the number of questions that are coming. Finally is the issue of, you know, the importance of collecting data to actually really be able to drive forward the circular economy. And may I just make a little bit of a nuance here? I am not necessarily speaking about regulatory data. I am talking about, in a way, for companies, the ability to calculate your return on investment on circular economy business models. If you are not calculating your resource savings or your energy savings, if you do not have the concepts to do so, whether it's through life cycle assessment or other tools, you are keeping the circular economy in a space that is quite qualitative instead of being, you know, moving it to the space that is economic. And what we're seeing in our discussions among companies is the moment the economic case is clear, circular economy becomes part of business as usual. When that case is not so clear is when you have inefficiencies and where the debate is taking longer than it should. I think these were really the key 5 takeaways I wanted to share with everybody. I strongly recommend everybody to read the examples in detail because I haven't been able to do them justice in this short introduction. But I think it's a much better use of everybody's time for us to have a very interactive Q&A moment to discuss some of these concepts rather than to have you listen. These are the recommendations that came from our brochure. I'm not interested in reading through all of them. We mentioned a number of them already during today's webinar. But maybe just as a guide for the question and answers in the sections to come, please have a look here and see whether any of these things jog your creativity in your ideas when it comes to asking for Q&A. So if you just give me a second, I'm going to look through the questions and try and collect a few things. Let me just start. Axel from the Parliament, do you want to get us started? Axel Singhofen, I see your name in the comment section. Do you want to go online? Otherwise, I could ask you a question. Okay. So Axel asks whether we, and I don't know whether he means the Commission or the private sector in this sense, sees a future to chemical recycling. Marius, do you want to start? I genuinely have an idea on this space and happy to start with it. But if you want to start, you're our guest, so honor goes to you.
Please go ahead. This is the topic why it's very interesting also to hear from the industry.
Sure. Well, listen, I think, you know, the companies we have around the table when it comes to AmCham are present in, you know, how do I say this? We produce products, we look at the end of life considerations, and whether it's mechanical, crushing, or recycling, we consider all of these options. The big question is, you know, what's the best cost-effective measure everywhere? I do think, you know, I mean, I'll speak for the industries I know best. Chemical recycling is a high value added process that allows you to get to a feedstock that is, you know, of good quality. It's not necessarily the best or least expensive option in all cases. But again, in this particular consideration, I would recommend a reflection that is product specific and waste stream specific to see what is the best treatment option to go for, rather than mandating that chemical recycling is best for everything or that mechanical recycling would be best for other. But we definitely see this as a growth market, as a place where more investments are needed, and as something that could unlock a lot of things in the circular economy going forward. Okay, please, Marius, give me a little bit of time to go through the Q&A while you answer.
Well, chemical recycling is something which is not really touched upon in depth in the Circular Economy Action Plan, which does not mean that there is no place for it. I think, what we have, we certainly always have to explore the potential of all recycling technologies and see what they can bring. That's why, there is a reference to chemical recycling in the Circular Economy Action Plan when we speak about the Horizon Europe and about what new innovations can be brought. So from that perspective, of course, chemical recycling is an interesting thing, and we are looking at it in that sense.
Thank you very much. So maybe two slightly more general questions. There are a number of questions around circular economy and green recovery. Some of them are very high level. I think if you could maybe start going a little bit deeper than what it is that you gave us in the introduction on what's likely to come next in the short-term horizon, what's likely to be financed. We understood in some of the documents that are not supposed to be circulated but are in our circles around the green recovery that there's a number of investments, that there's also going to be a staged approach in terms of what is likely to be financed or invested upon as a first wave, and then potentially a little bit later, and where you see circular economy investments fitting in that context.
Well, I think, everyone is so much concentrated on the recovery package and expecting that there will be one document which will be a big bazooka, which will change completely everything. But I think in the EU policy making, what we need to make sure, and the way we have to look at it, we have to look at the whole picture, where, how do we want to make that transformation, and also how do we want to make the recovery? Why am I saying this? I already mentioned at the beginning the biodiversity strategy, which has been adopted today. But also today, there was the country-specific recommendations to the various member states, which have been adopted. And this is the way, it's the European semester, it's the way how, on how the economic policy of the member states is being coordinated in the EU. And I think what is interesting is to see how much change there is over the years in those country-specific recommendations. I had a chance in the past to work, a lot on the European semester issues. And I know that from time to time there was a criticism, that there is not much changing in those recommendations. But actually there is a change, and there is quite a big change. And the change is related to the investments which are being recommended to particular member states. I will not, from my head, I will not be able to say which exactly member states will be there, but there is a big number which have also recommendations related to the circular economy, for example, and to increase the circularity and also the waste treatment and various other things. This is, of course, also in addition to some other environmental investments which are necessary in the water management and so on. They are not directly related to the circular economy, but that's, something which needs to be watched, I think, and taken into account. Because at the end of the day, although, of course, we need to have a compasses, and these two compasses, or even three, I may say, for recovery are the green transformation, are the digital transition, also, increase in resilience. But we have to realize that these are only the macro view, which we have for the whole Europe. Europe is not the same if you go to Portugal or to Lithuania or to Romania, or here in Belgium. That's why the country-specific recommendations are actually very important. And they are very important for the investment. When we were proposing the Just Transition Fund, I think it was in January, there was a clear reference also to the country-specific recommendations. And there you will see to which countries there are specific countries, it's being screened, and there are recommendations being made specifically to specific countries. And of course, then the discussion is taking place with the country itself. Again, it is never really a top-down approach. It has to be, what we want. We want that there would be a common understanding with the member state itself that they really need those investments to achieve the objectives that we have all set at the EU level. So that's how I would suggest to also look at the recovery package. It's one thing is of course the updated MFF. Everyone is eagerly waiting for it, following the press, following various documents which are, as you were saying, circulating. But that's not the only thing. You have to also see that many of the priorities are being set also in the European semester, and that is available as from today, completely available.
Sure. Thank you very much. So we have a number of questions around the textile strategy. Deborah, do you want to maybe ask it yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, and hi everyone. So I'm Deborah from Burson Cornwall, representing VF Corporation. They own big brands such as Vans, Timberland, and North Face. Thanks a lot for the opportunity. I wanted to know whether you could share a few insights on the upcoming textile strategy. Can we expect any legislation? Thank you very much.
Shall I come in immediately?
Maybe just one more question, just for efficiency's sake. I think Mr. Pietro Fiocchi from the European Parliament, you had a series of questions. It's maybe easier if you ask them yourself at this moment, and that way we can bring them together and then hand it over right back to you.
Hello, can you see me?
We can hear you. We can't. There, we can see you.
Hello, first of all, a big salutation to Marius.
Thank you.
There are some problems which are immediate problems. For example, one of the questions I had is on the directive on the single plastic use. And most of the restaurants in Italy are doing delivery, so they're using single plastic. Do you expect some kind of a relaxation or postponement of the single-use plastic directive in order to survive the COVID-19 virus? This is one question. Another one question is, I'm very interested in your position on the incinerator in any form, also the form in which they produce heat for heating houses and everything else. But in any case, they're burning waste, so they're not exactly circular economy, except that they're producing heat. What is your position on that? And that's about it for now. Thank you very much.
The floor is yours, Marius.
Okay, thank you very much to the questions. Thank you to the parliamentarian, to Pietro as well, for putting these very pertinent questions. I will start from textiles. That's the way the questions were asked. Well, I think I at the very beginning of my introduction, I was already mentioning that textiles is actually one of the areas where the recycling is really, not really taking place. It's perhaps 1% worldwide or something like this. And at the same time, it is in fact the fourth highest pressure category for use of primary raw materials. Water, after food, after housing, after transport, and it's also pretty bad in greenhouse emissions. It is not to say that now we have to avoid textiles. No, I think we need to embark a little bit on the road together with everyone, of course, together with the textiles industry, and to see how can we bring more sustainability into this area? So that's why, what we are thinking about a separate and quite a comprehensive EU strategy for textiles that needs to be prepared. The action plan is one thing, but you cannot, with an action plan, you can set a direction. You cannot really put all the things immediately. We have to cross the bridge when we come to the bridge, and now we are setting direction towards that bridge. But textiles could be a good candidate for the sustainable product policy, product framework which we were mentioning. We need and we can see how textile products are more fit for circularity. What's the uptake of secondary raw materials in them? Are the hazardous chemicals being tackled in the textile products? How can we empower businesses and private consumers to choose sustainable textiles? How can we, how can we have easy access to reuse and repair services for the textiles, for example, to make them that they would be used longer? So I think this is a bit of the route which we are going. Another route which we would like to go is to achieve higher levels of separate collection of textile waste. This is really important. Of course, this is not something which you can do overnight. It takes time, but I think it is necessary, because if you want more recycling, well, first of all, you need to gather also the material for that recycling in one place somewhere. Well, that's, if I may say, a little bit the light of where we would like to go. Of course, as I say, in consultation with the industry, sustainable product framework is going to be quite a piece of legislation, and it requires preparation. It requires really weighting all the options. Nobody wants to jump into something where we don't know the result, whether it's good, whether it's not too burdensome, and so on and so forth. So during that process, we also plan to get involved with the textiles industry and see how to bring that forward. Now, on the question of single-use plastics. Well, yes, of course we are aware that now with the restaurants not working, and not only in Italy, in many places, unfortunately, and this is a big burden to all the catering business. This is that's a huge hit, and a very negative hit. And then of course we need to find all the possibilities for them to really have the income for survival, but also to operate somehow, be it on the delivery basis. For delivery, of course, there are various materials which are also available, and I'm sure that as this particular situation as it develops, we see from one week to another, how it changes. What kind of deliveries are being done? I know that in many countries, the deliveries are taking place a lot, quite innovatively, and using quite a lot the paper packaging, which is more recyclable. I'm not saying what is better. I think for the moment, what we need is we really need that the restaurants would be able to function as much as possible in this manner. But I'm saying that there are various alternatives. We are monitoring the situation. We have been, by the way, monitoring the situation from the very beginning, because more generally, the waste services, it is, at a certain moment, there was also a question on how do you deal with the waste. So that's why on DG Environment's website, we have put a couple of guidances on how to deal with a separate collection of waste in this crisis. That we need still to keep it as much as possible. We also put a guidance on how to deal with the trans-border movements of waste in Europe, the situation is normalizing a little bit, but I think if we go back to March, it was quite a difficult situation. So we are monitoring the situation and also on the packaging. But as I say, there are also various alternatives to it. So let's see how this develops. On incinerators, I think incinerators have a role to play. I think this already comes from the first Economy Action Plan from 2016, a certain hierarchy of waste. There is at the from in terms of circularity, you have to think. Well, first you design the product so that it would last longer. That's a good option, because so many things are being fixed at the design level, at the production level. Secondly, then you go and see that the product itself would be used, that the consumer would be interested to also use it longer, and maybe you think about various models like product as a service and so on, where certainly it is being used more. Then, if the product is not being used, then the least you can change, I don't know, resell or something. This is of course another level. Then you think on how to take the good resources in the product, and that is another level. So you basically you try everything else before you reach the incineration, and of course theoretically this is the best model to achieve it. But then when you reach that particular stage, I think there is a very clear place for incineration, and frankly, I do not think that this is something which has to be forgotten, or we shouldn't be so blindly saying that this is against circularity. There is a place for it.
Great. Thank you very much. Two questions which we're going to take together. Alexis, you had a question on microplastic, and then Hermes, the floor is yours to talk about green claims and product environmental footprint. And for my colleagues, after the questions, please feel free to flag the results of the Slido poll as well. But let's finish with these two questions first.
Thank you very much. This is Alexis from CREA BU Public Affairs. I had indeed a question on microplastics, as the Circular Economy Action Plan mentions two initiatives, one being the ongoing restriction procedure for intentionally added microplastics. We've seen some delays recently due to notably COVID. Does the Commission expect additional delay on this restriction procedure? And the second one would be more on the upcoming activities related to unintentionally released microplastics. What is the Commission thinking at the moment in terms of measures, more upstream measures to tackle pellet loss, or more downstream with the leak into the environment? And what is the timetable? Where the Commission thinking on this? And can we expect more legislative proposal, such as restrictions, or non-legislative? Thank you very much.
Yes, and this is Hermes from the European Federation of Bottled Waters. Thank you for the discussion. A quick question regarding the green claims. It's very clear that you want to evaluate that, taking into account the tool that has been created for the last 4 years, which is the Product Environmental Footprint, PEF. My quick question is, and actually Packed Water, we have been doing this pilot for the last 4 years. My question is, how can you evaluate when there are product category rules for those who participated and those sectors that did not participate? So how can you regulate green claims of these two? Thank you.
Marius, the floor is yours. Don't see Marius on video anymore.
He's on mute.
He's on mute. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
I'm back. It's I think for all of us, it's still a continuous crash course on various applications which we use for communication nowadays. This was, by the way, something which I was always thinking that we should be using more of it, and never really trying them, And I think that's maybe one of the few positive things from in this situation that we can, without really traveling and so on, we can meet and speak. On the green claims. Well, for the green claims, what is important, if I understand the question correctly, what is important is to really know better for the consumer what exactly they're buying. What is the company claiming here? All these eco, green, and so on. It becomes confusing, So that's the idea, a little bit to normalize these things. And for this, of course, Commissioner Sinkevicius will also be. This is not purely environmental issue. Right? You have to deal with the consumer protection. So Commissioner Reinders will be very much involved in these things. So I think on this one there are things to do. If there are deeper things that the person asking was having, maybe we can take them bilateral, and I can dwell a little bit more, on that. And on microplastics, yes, indeed, the timing, I think, for initiatives there on the microplastics has been planned for 2021. For me, it's a little bit still too early to say, how quickly we can and how many things will be postponed or will not be postponed. The idea is that for circular economy, but that is a more of a general stance, that for circular economy there are a lot of important initiatives. So there is not really much necessity to postpone them, of course, if the resources allow, because all the resources so far in the last 9-10 weeks have been devoted to really immediate effects of the crisis. Some of the things which were maybe not less important, they might get postponed a little bit, but on circular economy, I would really hope that only a very few things get postponed, if at all. This we will know fairly soon, because the Commission work program, which will be looking at many of those initiatives, is being finalized, and in a week or two we can share more details. But for the moment, I think it's still a bit early. It's not only about the policy impact of various initiatives. We also have to try to predict the workload on various other things which will be necessary to get the economies back on track.
Well, listen, thank you very much for all of this, and for all the people who asked questions in the chats and we did not have a chance to get back to you. I have copy-pasted all of the chats, and we'll try to divide the questions and get back to you so that you get a proper answer. I believe good questions deserve good answers, so we will go out of our way to get back to you. Maybe could I ask my colleagues, since we've reached the top of the hour, to leave our guests with a poll of the 50 plus people who are on the webinar right now, and what they think are the main drivers when it comes to the circular economy. So you'll see that the barriers are seen to be an issue of quality and performance, or maybe even limited availability, high quality and high performance recycled material. So that's the answer to our first question. We have a split between infrastructure and the single market for waste as the key drivers that could actually really make a difference going forward. I wanted to thank you very, very much for your time, for your effort. Obviously, if any value in following up with you in detail on some of the case studies we have in our brochure, you know where to find us. I mean, we were hoping that today would be a kickoff of a longer discussion. I completely, echoing your opening remarks, agree, and I think most of our companies see the circular economy as a potential when it comes to green growth, as a potential to open new markets, as a potential to extract more value out of some of the markets in which we're already present. And we are really hoping to have a very constructive discussion, both with the Commission and with the legislators on all the files that we'll be going through, to make sure that, you know, we can help bring about this economic dimension of the circular economy. You know, where the obstacles are, where it's cost prohibitive to do certain things, and what it would take to actually get there. Because I'm hoping that the second circular economy is one that will end up being about the pragmatic transition into the circular economy rather than just the framework, which was the case for the first one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Leah, and thank you all those who joined to listen. It was very interesting, by the way, to see the Slido answers, which are also really revealing on the areas where we need to really. I would be glad if you send them to me so that I can show also to the colleagues, because this is also a good feedback, and it confirms some of the thinking which we are having. But otherwise, thank you so much, and I wish you all a very good afternoon, and you know, hope to meet you on another occasion.
Definitely. Thank you very much for your time.